You're listening to the Deadly Uncle Podcast,
a safe space for deadly uncle conversations.
All right, next we have Matt Patenaude.
All the way from the Buffalo Lake Métis settlement.
This man was one of the organizers and on the committee of the Oakmau Awards, the first men's awards, and I just think it's wonderful that we're having these things happen in our community.
Yeah, Matt's going to bring his perspective as a first responder, a firefighter, and a worker in public service. So stick around because he's going to give you some pretty good stories.
Starting out, my name is Matthew Patenaude. I'm from Buffalo Lake Métis settlement, so a few hours north of here. I've been in public service now for 4 years. Previous to that, I was a first responder. I was a firefighter for 10. I've done everything from Indigenous consultation with Métis settlements, so doing a lot of traditional land use studies and protecting Indigenous lands, things like spiritual sites, fishing sites, with against gas and proponents, making sure that when they're developing and they're building, that they're not going through anything important that's within the community. So with that job, it was actually really interesting because we did a lot of work with elders, interviews, learning about exactly where they fished, where they hunted, going out to sites. So places like ACO Gas or EPCOR, any of these companies would pay for us to go out and review the sites, review the work that they're doing, and it was really interesting. And the treaty areas, the First Nations, they actually started their consultation unit in 2006. So the Métis settlements actually started ours, I think, in 2016. So I was kind of at the forefront of that. And previous to that, I did everything from Burger King to machining. Did quite a bit. So yeah, so I started public service here. It's actually almost 5 years. So a day after my son was born. Yeah, it was interesting. My manager's like, "What are you doing here?" Literally showered up and left the hospital room and went to work. And yeah, my ex was in labor for like 36 hours.
Hard work ethic there.
Wow. Yes.
Well, I was like, I got to make some money. I got to support a kid now. It's not about me.
There's no celebration?
No.
No stogies on that one. Just straight
to work, man. Yeah.
I'm just going to close the window here.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's what I was trying to get us.
Oh, okay. I heard a little bit of a loud muffler.
That's what I heard too. And I was like, well, let's just close that up. I'll try not to knock everything down on my way back. Full in a china shop.
There goes the set.
Yeah. Trent's not allowed to move once we start because things fall over.
So yeah, I pretty much after I started with public service, I was in a unit called the Family Information Liaison Unit with Victim Services, and what that unit basically takes care of was the MMIWG initiative that was brought out by the 94 or 92 calls to action. So when we did the initial work, it was Tracy McCocas, who was my manager through Indigenous programs. She developed the kind of framework around the MMIWG work that they were going to be doing. And then the Trudeau government actually put in funding into place to allow every province and territory to really have a unit that helps families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls go through every part of the justice system, reopen cases, look into homicide files and missing person files, be able to advocate for them and talk with the families, and show them exactly what's happened. Some of these cases were from the 60s. We had cases all the way up to Amber Tuckaroo, Gloria Gladue. So there was a lot of very high profile, prolific cases that we were dealing with. So with that work, we kind of transitioned, and I moved into Victim Services as the Indigenous Programs Liaison. So my role now is basically addressing gaps, creating and writing policy, and doing a lot of program work with Victim Services and especially Indigenous and isolated communities. So it's a lot of work. I mean, it's really rewarding. I get to go into community. I get to see a lot of Alberta, a lot of places that, you know, a lot of people often forget because when we talk about isolated communities, I mean, someone down in Eden Valley or up in Fox Lake, I mean, you go up there and you are in the middle of nowhere, and it's honestly, it's hard to see because, like I said, they're often forgotten, and the work that we're trying to do is really, you know, make sure that they're staying within focus of the world, focus within what we're doing, and ensuring that we're keeping them, you know, in the main picture, because that's the most important piece. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I do right now. And musically, that's a long story. So I started music when I was 8 years old. I played in a punk band. I played in some metal bands, some hardcore bands. I was actually a drummer, and I grew up listening to my dad, who has been a lifelong musician himself, and sitting at the stairs, listening to him play, you know, sitting on the couch at 1 a.m, falling asleep to all of his bands coming over and jamming, and you know, waking up at 3 a.m. to like the bang on the floor to come help him unload, come unload and load up the gear. And so, you know, when I was younger, I never really understood music. You know, it was always around me. It was just a part of life, you know, and it wasn't anything special to me at that time because you know, I grew up listening to it and being around it. So I wasn't really, you know, taken into music until I was a little bit older. And I got into it by watching my older cousin, Darren. He would come over with like Iron Maiden tapes and like all these old metal bands. And I was just like, no, that's music. And started listening to that. And
I swear to God, we live parallel lives. Me and this guy. We've talked about this before, but I had an older cousin, his older brother, that used to come and bring me all that kind of music too, Iron Maiden and all that stuff on his tapes.
It was, you know, it was so different because I heard country, I heard, you know, fiddle music, and I heard all that. But when I heard this, I'm like, whoa, like Silverchair and Nirvana and all these like, you know, grungy hard bands. Then as an 8-year-old kid, you're just like, whoa, like this is wild. So I told my dad I wanted a drum set. I'm like, I could hear all the crashing, the banging, and you know, the country is nice and soft, and a little snare here and a little hi-hat there. But like that was like aggressive, right? And you know, you're 8 years old and you just want to break things. So
yeah, completely different style of music for sure. That can more, I guess, connect to a teenager feel for sure. I could see that.
Yeah, and the preteen angst, I guess you want to call it that. And you know, so I got a drum set, started playing drums, went through a whole bunch of different phases. I mean, like I said, punk to metal, and played the Warped Tour with a couple bands. You know, I went on tour, and it was like I was like 16 maybe, and went across. I had like $100 to my name, and I remember we recorded in a place called Studio One in Winnipeg, and I was there for a week. And my dad, like back in the day, he didn't have cell phones. He didn't have no way of contacting someone. It was like you get to the next gas station, you call, check in, make sure you know that you're okay. And I was broke, had no money, and so I had to call my dad, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, can you send me a couple bucks?" And he's like, "Why? What? You're not, you know, you're touring. You're not rich and famous yet. You're not making all that money." And I was like, "All right, well, you know, it was a hard lesson." But he sent me some money. Western Union, had to go pick it up at a Money Mart or something, and went and bought like cases of noodles. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a whole bunch of noodles. Take these on the road with me. Every gas station, I just go get the hot water from the coffee pot, and that was my meals. But I mean, we lived off of T-shirt money.
Yeah,
you know, those are the days of T-shirt money.
I'm surprised your dad didn't say, "Well, you know, if you'd have stayed here and played with me, you wouldn't have to borrow money."
Well, that's what I did. Yeah, right after that, I learned that hard lesson, and I was 17 when I was just turning 18, actually. Like the week before I turned 18, he got in touch with me. And he's like, "You want to make some money?" And I was like, "You know what? Let's try it out." So I was playing drums, like I said. So he gave me a guitar, gave me the set list. He showed me some, I was kind of fooling around with the guitar for a couple of years, but not like playing. And he's just like, here, take this, learn these. You have like 2 weeks to learn this. We're going to go on the road and you're going to come play rhythm. And we're playing in Lloydminster 2 Fridays on your birthday. I'm like, oh man. So I played like 2 weeks in a row, just constant. Like my fingers were bleeding and they just hurt. And it was just like trying to get it right and, getting the progressions down and making sure that it was all good. And I was starting to feel a little confident and it was rewarding to be able to say, hey, like, this is going to be exciting. I'm going to go play with my dad and actually make money and not come home with negative, $200. And so I got to that first gig, 17 years old, and they didn't let you into the bar only to play your set. So every set had to go up to the hotel room and wait there in 40 minutes or half hour and come back down and play. And then I turned 18 at midnight. So as soon as I turned 18, the waitress was like, don't have to go downstairs or upstairs anymore, you can stay here. So
you only did that for one gig?
One gig, one night.
My brother Bryce did that for almost a year here.
Really?
Up in the.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I know. Only one day, half a gig. And,
there you go.
And it was wild. And that first gig, I was so nervous. Like being behind a drum set, you're like, you got all these things in front of you, and no one's really paying attention to you. But standing up front on stage, I'm like sitting there, and I remember trying to be country. I asked my dad to if I could borrow his cowboy hat, if I could borrow his cowboy boots. I had like these nice jeans I went and got and a shirt, and I was like playing, and my dad's just laughing, and I'm like, what? And he's like, turn it up. And I'm like, I had it like at 1. And I was like, no, I'm not turning it up.
Can hear me.
No. And he's like, no, turn it up. So I turned it up a little bit more, and I was still messing up and trying to figure it out, and I was getting nervous. And this waitress, she kept walking by, and she's like laughing every time she walked by. I'm like, am I that bad? Like, so I turned it down a little bit more, and my dad's like, no, turn it up. So after that set, I went up to her. I was like, am I really loud at the front? And I was like, what's like, I see you laughing and smiling. And she's like, no, she's like, look down. I had my shirt inside out and backwards. I was so nervous. I couldn't even dress myself properly. Yeah. So it was pretty bad. But after that was kind of the wake up call that I needed. And it was what I wanted to do. As soon as I played that and I got that feeling, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And, since then, I mean, that was 18. I've been almost playing with him for 15 years. And wow. So.
Where did you grow up? What area did you grow up in?
In Buffalo Lake.
Buffalo Lake.
But I moved out here when I was 6 back to Edmonton. So I actually grew up in Elmwood, not too far from here, Calder. And then we settled down in just outside of Sherwood Park. Okay. So a lot of growing up out there.
Okay, cool.
So you come from, I'm coining this term, I think, a family of helpers, kind of like your dad was a firefighter. He was actually the chief at Buffalo Lake for many years, wasn't he? And then your parents also took in foster kids.
Yes.
So how did that kind of shape your childhood, helping others, and is that kind of what led you towards your career in public service? Or
I've never actually thought about that, of kind of how that shaped me in a way of where I've came to or been drawn to. But like growing up, I mean, it had challenges, of course. I mean, when you have my parents, I think the count was like over 60 different kids and at-risk youth and teenagers, and they were more of a specialized home. So they would bring in kids that were AWOL, running away, coming out of gangs, to the very, very challenging stuff like babies who have been taken away from like very, very terrible situations. Like I know we had one baby that he was put in a bathtub of boiling water, and they brought him out and sent him over. So my mom was helping my mom change bandages, and and I was 8 or 9, And seeing a lot of that stuff, it really matured you quickly, I think, in a way. I mean, it wasn't bad, like, it was never like terrible to see, but it was hard to see because I was the same age as some of these kids. And and you hear what their stories are, and you look at what you have, and you're like, wow, like it was an eye-opener early. And how it shaped me, I mean, there was a lot of times where I kind of felt regret, or not regret, but I was kind of angry at my parents, because it felt like you're always taking care of these other kids. And I was, like I said, I was 8 or 9, and I didn't understand why they were bringing in kids. We have me and my sister, and we have this and that, and I never understood it. And you're bringing these kids, and of course, like, they were at risk, high risk, so there's a lot of attention that needed to be given to them. So I never understood until I got older, and then I realized like the work that they were doing, and the sacrifices. Like, I mean, my dad, he would go on the road playing music, and then he was a truck driver for a lot of years, and those years, I mean, he was doing 2 or 3 months at a time on the road, right? So you wouldn't see him, and again, no cell phones, no Facebook, no Facebook video chats. So he would jump on the truck phone, or the gas station phone, give his kids give us kids a call, and you get to talk to dad for 20 minutes, and you'd have to hit the road again. But so mom was really the mom and dad at home. So not only was she raising me and my sister, but she was raising everybody else. And it also shaped me too, because now I'm watching her and all the work that she's done, helping kids. She was doing gang violence workshops. She was doing all sorts of things, right? And I was lucky enough to be able to attend those early. And I think that's, like you're saying, it's really how it shaped me into where I am now, thinking about it, because they were always a family of helpers, like you said. They were always bringing in people, not only just the work they're doing in the foster care system, but family. And as Indigenous people, it was often a situation where you'd be raising a cousin or a nephew or a grandkid. And so I had cousins that were coming to live with us, and I had a lot of relatives that were coming through and
people
living with us.
Come for coffee and stay for 2 months.
Make a bed in the basement. And now they're
you guys need to go get groceries. I'm gonna be here a while.
Yeah, but I mean, it was nice in that way, because then we always had someone mowing the lawn. Had a dishwasher.
Some help, please. Some help, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it really did shape me into who I am. I think I struggled early in my teens, trying to figure out who I was. As any kid, as any teenager, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Where I wanted to go. Music was always at the root, always at the heart. But like, you always hear, like, well, you can do music, but you should always have a backup plan. And that was something that even my dad, as a lifelong musician, always told me. Get your education, make sure you have a backup plan, make sure you're doing something. And so I went to school, and I did. That's where I went to Emergency Services Academy, and got into EMR. I did a little bit of work with that for a bit. And then I kind of took a pause and then started going into machining. And then really I just started playing music full time. I was like, I'm 20. I'm going to get out there. And I was playing with my dad. And I started freelancing with people, and really just kind of enjoying that. And it really, brought me to the place I am now. It took me a while to figure out. And I don't even know if I still want to do this forever. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those jobs that I'm doing now. It seems like it could be a great career forever, but I always want to do more. And I always
expanding. And I think, like, I wouldn't really call it a plan B. I would call it like something that you're meant to do, as well as music. We're always expanding ourselves as artists and as individuals of how do we express and how do we bring people together through what we love to do, because it is kind of almost like, because we're not making a ton of money when we do these this community work, but
Mhm.
it's a good part for our souls, and it's something good for the community, and I just wanted to ask you about how does why is it important, or is it important to you uh, to see more males in these roles of where you're in, where you're running programs and stuff, and being a part of helping and stuff. Why is it important, do you think, for men to be in those positions?
I think, you know, I think it's important because there's got to be balance. There has to be balance. With everything we do in life, there's always got to be balance. You can have really negative days, but you have to have the positive, and you have to see the positives. But I think that reflects into what we're doing. I mean, we need women and men in everything that we're doing, but a very good balance. And I often find that with even teachings with elders, both sides have really good perspectives. And if you don't learn both sides of those perspectives, you're only learning one half of the story, I feel. So I think having both men and women in these roles, but for men, I think it's really important because we've been often the hunter and gatherers, the ones out there doing the work. But I think over the years, a lot of that role has really shifted in a good way. I mean, women are coming up and doing a lot of the work, but men are I feel like they're losing their ways in a lot of ways because a lot of the programs and stuff have been really directed towards motherhood and different things like that.
Hmm.
So there's when I became a dad, um, there wasn't really any fatherhood programs that I could find.
Yeah.
And it was tough as a dad because I'm raising a boy now, and it's like, okay, so what do I do? And I would ask my dad, and I would ask different males in my life, how I can manage this. And of course, I would talk to my mom because, like I said, she was mom and dad, right? So she had both of those roles when my dad was away. But I found that the fatherhood programming wasn't there, and maybe I couldn't find it. Maybe there was something there, but it wasn't readily available, and that was the big issue for me. Because I kind of felt lost, and luckily 5 years ago I had Google.
Yeah.
Because I don't know
Yeah.
how someone could have did it 20, 30 years ago
Yeah.
when they didn't have those options, right?
Hmm.
And I think that was an issue too, because you didn't have any help. So you kind of raised someone the way that you felt was the best, and
Yeah.
you didn't know. I mean, who's to tell you what's the best? And even reading Google, some of the things you're looking at, you're like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, that's kind of a weird way of
Yeah.
teaching somebody, right?
My dad always says this, we learned how to raise your kids from our parents. Nowadays, people learn how to raise their kids from books. He's like, whatever we did was never good enough, I guess.
I think it's also where our parents came from, right? We gotta look at that, and there is, you're right. I've never heard of any programs for especially back then, and like especially when I had my two boys. Like I never heard of any programs. It was just like, and then also like growing up with like a residential school mentality, which I'm still fighting with today. It's hard to ask for help as a man, right? It's hard to reach out and make that phone call or whatever it is, So I always found that. So I think it's also hugely important for men to be involved in the programming, and to give that perspective for sure. So I'm glad that you're doing it. And so, did you find yourself, like when you were working with with the MMIW and all those movements, were you like one of the only males in those positions, or?
Actually, it's surprising. There was myself and Ralph Cardinal. He's incredible. He was like
Compared
a mentor.
to how many women?
Yeah, a lot of women. But I find in those roles, because it's a very compassionate It's a very, very heavy-hearted. You have to be extremely compassionate. You have to be able to,
Empathetic.
empathetic and listen. And you're listening to families traumatize themselves by telling their stories
Mhm.
or looking at autopsy reports or whatever the case is, right? And oftentimes the people that are sitting across the table are men
Yeah.
in uniform, in different aspects, right? They have that power differential. A lot of RCMP officers that we dealt with were males, right? So, and a lot of the families we were dealing with were female. A lot of the mothers and the sisters that were coming out. So on my side, on the working side, so there was myself and Ralph in the unit. And across Canada, I'm not sure exactly how many males were involved in the initiative, but a lot of the units were female, heavily prominent female. But it was interesting to see that, and even in government today, like the roles that I'm in, it's a very female heavy work environment, right? So.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it's just because it's Alberta and a lot of men, have that. I don't know what it is about Alberta, but there's a lot of that trade mentality.
Yeah, I
A
can
lot
see
of
that.
a lot of guys are out doing the trades, and
Well, they can make a ton of money, right? So
that's the thing, right?
they got to trade
Yeah.
their life for the work, but I
Mhm.
mean, you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. So, I think that's where you see a lot of the workforce going, right? And so it's interesting, but I do see a really good balance now. There's a really good balance of both male and female in the workplace, and but yeah, it was interesting to see. The neat thing is with that group it was called the Helping Us Grow group. It was an elder advisory committee that we had set up. Well, Tracy had set up, and they brought elders from across the province. So we did have a lot of male representation on that elders committee. Dave Matilipi from up in Peace River, and Butch Wolflake from down Sixica area. So it was a nice balance because we had Teresa Corky, Corky from Red Deer. Yeah, she's on that committee. Dr. Maggie Hodgson was on that committee. Teresa Strawberry. So, some of the best people I've ever met and learned from. And it was nice because when we would go to those meetings, you had both sides. You had both perspectives, the male and the female, but you also had both teachings from both sides. So it was like, it grounded us, and it really helped, Ralph, myself, and all the ladies that we worked with really ground ourselves and connect. So
That's amazing.
yeah, it was really good.
I got a question for you. In your position, you're taking on a lot of people's trauma
Mm-hmm.
every day, day in and day out. And from my own experience as a frontline worker, I know that can be tough. And do you have some kind of self-care plan in place? And if so, can you explain what a self-care plan is for our male viewers that may not know? Because self-care is something that we talk a lot about in frontline work. And, I know from experience that I wasn't very good at it because I had to take two leaves from work doing, because of the trauma that I took on from other people. But how do you deal with that?
Well, self-care, it's got a lot of definitions. It can mean, that word can mean a lot to different people. I find as a man, like you said, growing up, you never asked for help. You never, you'd always bottle things down. And myself too, I came from a residential school. I'm a second generation residential school survivor. And it was, like my dad would be gone often. So, I never had an opportunity to talk with him about anything and get his perspectives. But he was also the first generation survivor, and he never really talked about his emotions, or, it wasn't like something we really showed. It was something I never learned until actually like 5 years ago when I started in this role and started talking to elders and going to ceremony and being a part of that, and being told it's okay to show emotion. It's okay to feel this way. So self-care for me, I mean, growing up, I didn't really understand what that meant. I never definitely didn't do it. And I bottled everything in, and then bottling everything in turns into anxiety, and it turns into depression, and it turns into stress, and it turns into sickness. And I think those things I wish I knew a lot earlier. So self-care now for me is something that we can escape with. So for me, hobbies, music. I mean, geez, through the pandemic, I could feel myself. I was really working on myself. I was getting up there. Then the pandemic hit, and it was just like 2 years without being able to do my self-care.
2 years of backward.
Yeah. So I literally, when started going downhill, I could feel it mentally. I could feel my body going back into that little pit that I was crawling out of for so long. So self-care for me has definitely been music. But self-care, I think for anyone that's listening would be what makes you feel good, what makes you feel happy, what makes you, take away some stress. I mean, ceremony is a huge one. Sweats. I mean, so I love going to sweat lodge ceremonies just to recoup, kind of
It's like a reset button.
It is.
It's like a rebirth.
Exactly. And, smudging, daily smudging. I think, grounding ourselves out in nature, going outside, taking your shoes off and your socks off and just walking around in the grass. I mean,
exercise helps.
Oh,
Spending time outside for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. Exercise is huge. Huge.
As you
huge.
can tell, I'm a pretty big proponent of exercise. But I do actually exercise every day now. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
because, health is, I don't know, like I'm 48 years old and I come to realize that I have definite cycles in what I'm doing all the time. Like I'll be good for a while. And then, like you said, I suffer from depression. I'll go into a little bit of a depressive state for a while. Then I got to fight my way out of it. And then, with that goes weight fluctuations and mood fluctuations. And, it's always a constant battle. But you have to keep restarting and retrying, because if you don't.
Oh, yeah. Then you're back at square one.
Yeah.
And I think you got to practice it every day.
Mhm.
Self-care is something that, you should be doing it as much as you do anything else. Well, if you're working all day and you're bringing in trauma and you're listening to other people's trauma and you're dealing frontline work, then you got to go out and you got to decompress. You got to find what makes you happy. You got to do that for a bit and just kind of reset.
Mhm.
Video games. A lot of people are like, "Oh, video games are terrible," but for a lot of people I know that do frontline work, they'll just go drive a car around for 25 minutes and just listen to music loud and just zone out in that. They'll pick up their guitar, they'll write poetry, they'll do anything that kind of gets them out of that mindset, right?
And develop the ability to leave what you're dealing with at work and not take it home, because that's the hardest part.
Mm-hmm. And I think again, the pandemic really showed how hard that was. For me, my decompression from work oftentimes was getting into my car, driving home from work, and just thinking about my day and leaving it as I'm driving and getting ready to go home and be with my son and cook dinner and do things like that. But working from home, it was like close your laptop and you're here, and you don't have that disconnect. You don't have that second to escape. So you close your laptop and then you have your son who wants your attention now, and you don't have that minute to lose it and get rid of that trauma that you've been dealing with, or the issues at work, or anything. I mean, frontline service or any work that you're doing, you have to really find that minute for yourself. And especially as men, I find that there's a lot of expectation on what we do and who we are and what we're expected to do in society and in life. And those pressures can really, really get to you. And if you don't take that second to decompress and
do something for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because we're often doing things for other people, helping out as much as we can, with family, with friends, and whatever it is, you got to find that second.
Yeah, I think it's only recently that I guess us as men have been thinking about our mental health, our physical health, all those type of things. Like working out with uncles and stuff was one thing, right? But actually watching what you eat, all those type of things, was never something that we talked about. And also how you feel mentally, like how was your day? How was your how is your mental thinking and all those things,
How did that make you feel? Did any of your uncles ever ask you that?
Yeah, no, not at all. No, you weren't allowed to say how you felt. Only if it felt good, eh? Then you could say it was okay,
Yeah, exactly.
But
But don't.
yeah, I just I got a question for you that so being Métis and getting into these positions, how were you welcomed in being Métis, and you were finding out history about about the land and all those things. Tell me about your journey as being a Métis worker that may be around some full nation people and that type of thing. How was that? How was that for you?
I found in the professional world, there's a lot more training for diversity. There's a lot more, inclusion training, diversity, especially in government. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't any, issues with Métis people, or I never felt any different than anybody else, which was a really, really nice thing. Like my manager, she was raised in Saddle Lake. She's white, but she was raised by and was married into a Native family. So she was like right from Saddle Lake. Like you wouldn't know anything any different, right? So she taught me a lot. I mean, everyone in my unit was Indigenous, and a few people weren't, but they really learned about the culture and really wanted to learn about the culture, and that's really where I learned about what Métis was, because I knew I was Métis, I knew I was from the Métis settlement, but I didn't understand what that meant. I had no idea about my culture. Again, another thing from the residential school system, it wasn't really taught and practiced in my house. I heard about it. I saw my dad smudge once in a while, like here and there, but it was almost like it was hidden in a way, like he didn't want to show us, because even my cookum, not wanting to teach the language because that's what got them in trouble.
Yeah.
So she never, she always teach English to her kids so they could get further in life and they didn't have to deal with what she did. So, even my language, which is Michif, I think there was, last in the year of the language, there's 600 people in the world that speak it left.
Wow.
So it's literally a going extinct. So
my cookum used to speak as well. Yeah. Michif as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful language. I mean,
my mushroom spoke Michif as well.
Oh yeah.
His mother was Métis.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's a beautiful language, and there's a lot of places up north, like Paddle Prairie. They speak often. I mean, the Ghost Keepers, a lot of people up there, they really keep that language alive. And back home, like Elmer Ghost Keeper, he's a incredible elder, and he keeps that language alive. But growing up as Métis, like I said, my identity, I never understood it. I never really got it. And growing up in Edmonton and then outside of Sherwood Park, I never understood it because I was never around it. I was always around, other people, other cultures, except Indigenous people. Until, but I learned what being Indigenous was from fighting, which was crazy. It was, I went to school in Sherwood Park, and obviously I'm not very visibly Indigenous, but
what do you mean? You look like me.
So, but I would go to school, and I think it was in grade 3 and 4. I would go to school, and I had a bunch of friends, and everyone, it was all good. And then one day my dad came and picked me up, and my dad's super dark, he's visibly Indigenous. And they're like, "Who's that?" And I'm like, "Well, that's my dad." I'm grade 4, I don't know how old you are, 8, 10, around there. And then they're like, "Oh, you're an Indian." And I'm like, "I don't know what that means." Yeah, I am. Of course I am. And then it's like, oh, so now it's Cowboys versus Indian.
I told you we live parallel lives. I grew up in Red Deer. Same shit.
Oh, yeah.
Same shit.
Yeah. So every recess, that was the game. And I was the only Indian. So it was everyone versus me. And that went on for 3-4 years until junior high, when kids started understanding it a little bit more, and
Yeah.
you start getting older and you don't, but I never blamed them for it. Like as I got older, I never, was never angry at them. I was angry at where they learned it from.
Yeah.
I was angry at the people, because that's taught.
Yeah, it
Racism is
is.
taught.
Yeah.
And so I knew, as I got older and understood it more, I'm like, I was angry at the parents.
But at some point, they got to figure it out too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of people did apologize
Yeah.
when we got older.
Yeah.
There was the folks that said, I'm sorry for doing that, and I never understood.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah. Well, it was different times, right?
Yeah.
It was something that was a little more, accepted, to say some of these things. The reason why I asked you that is because in some of our, in some of our traditional ways, a lot of our elders, they, when they went to the residential school, they have that survivors mentality. And, so, in some of, with some of our elders, we're not accepted if you're not, as dark to learn these. And that's not only for Métis, that's for like regular Indigenous people, that I've seen where, you're not quite accepted into, the ceremonial or learning some of the ceremonial ways because you're not as dark as some of the other people. And I've just seen that, right? So I have to be honest about, these things, and I've experienced it myself, and so I that's why I asked you, and I know that with time and everything, our elders are learning, and not all of our elders are like that, for sure. Not all of our ceremony people are like that, but I've definitely seen a different treatment between some of the ones that were more, I guess, native colored, and then some of the ones that were more light. I was considered, even light, on my reserve, and and then considered an Indian in the city, right? So it's just kind of living in both of those worlds. But I know that our elders and everybody are learning from our new generation, which is really awesome, because it's important that we, celebrate everybody that wants to learn, that has Indigenous blood inside of them, whether you want to learn or not. I think it should be accepted, and it should be celebrated that we want to share that with our next generation, and with our children. So I was talking to you earlier, and you said that there is, and I know that you have some names to mention, and unfortunately, we were going to have a guest on today, but things happen, people are busy, but tell me a little bit about the project that you're involved in, or the committee you sit on, where you guys are going to be celebrating Indigenous men.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll give you a little backstory. So 4 years ago, my colleague Janice Randhal, she was with the MMIWG, the Family Information Liaison Unit, and she approached me, and we were just having lunch, and we were talking about this initiative that she's been working on. And at that time, she was working on it for 6 or 7 years, I think, at that time. But it was only an idea, right? And it was an idea that she came up with some of her ceremony brothers and sisters that had this idea to celebrate Indigenous men and to honor Indigenous men, because as a woman who's raising a boy as a single mom, she saw a lot of the traumas and the issues that were happening not only within her family, within her household, but within the communities, right? And she came up with this idea to give back to the men and help raise these men up, to get out of those cycles. And so when she approached me, we sat on that idea for about a year and talked about it, and kind of, what can we do? Like, how can we do this? Like, what do we want to do? Like, how can we help these Indigenous men? And it came down to, honoring them with an award, with a award that they can aspire to achieve at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how that was, how it kind of came about was, we look at the Esqueo Awards, or the Inspire Awards, and these different awards for Indigenous people. But like something like the Inspire Award, they're really good, but I mean, they're very, you have to be very successful, or you have to be very, very prominent in Indigenous communities to kind of get some of those awards. Or with the Esqueo, it's a female based award, which is amazing. We're honoring our women and the achievements that they are doing. But Janice had felt that men were kind of getting pushed down a little bit in certain aspects, or not at the same level. So she wants to really see, like we were talking about balance earlier. We need to balance both those sides out, because we look at Indigenous culture in the circle, and we have the elders and the children in the middle, then we have the women around them, and then we have the men around the whole group as the warriors. And each of those circles needs to be healthy. And we've been working on the children, and the children that are coming up are doing amazing work. And the elders are helping that. They're teaching, like you said, they're becoming, more involved. They're understanding that, the generations and the times are changing. The women, our beautiful, strong Indigenous women are really, picking up the pieces and helping themselves get through the traumas and healing. But when I'm walking home from the Brownlee building I park near the Mustard Seed, I see a lot of Indigenous men out there still. They're sleeping outside. The homelessness, I think it's a high number of men still. And that's what we wanted to honor. We wanted to look at that. We wanted to say, who are our leaders? Who are these people that we need to bring up? We need to fix that outer circle. We need to make it stronger. And we need to show that there are leaders in the communities. And whether it's, we have several awards. We have 7 awards that are based off the 7 teachings. We have like the Jimmy Herman Performance Award. We have the Michael Adju Wounded Warrior Award. We have awards for leaders in all aspects of life. And, it doesn't matter if you're a leader on the street, because there are leaders in the street. I mean, that you work front lines, you saw them. There's people out there that are helping people on the street when they're on the street themselves, right? There's elders out there. There's
everyday dads.
Oh yeah, everyone. Yeah. They're within the prison systems. They're incarcerated. There's leaders in those prisons that are trying to help the youth or their fellow man break their traumas and get out of there, right? Maybe they're lifers, maybe they're doing a hard time, but they're trying to help the younger ones not do that and not keep coming back into those systems. And we want to honor those men as well, because, those are the men that need it the most, and so what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be having our awards ceremony. So this is going to be, when's this released? In January, December?
January, something like that. December,
Yeah.
January.
December, January, somewhere around there.
So the award shows already
Indian
happened.
time.
But yeah, so we're going to be having it in November
Okay.
on the 18th, and it's going to be at City Hall.
Well, why don't you tell us who's going to win then, if it's going to be in November?
Well, we haven't had the nominations yet.
Yeah.
And,
That's so funny.
well, the way we want to do the nominations, though, and Kurt, I was kind of talking about this with you. It's we often see popularity contests and all these kind of award shows. And music. I mean,
music, actors, those type
everything.
of things, and it's like,
Yeah.
it can't be a popularity contest. It's got to be like people that are putting in the work, not how many likes you get and all those things. I totally gotcha on that.
I don't know if I could qualify on either then, because I don't get many likes. And I don't
and the way we wanted to do it is no pictures of people, and just their story, what they've done, and their accomplishments in life. So
it's like The Voice, but without
exactly.
Yeah.
And you're not looking at a person's name. You're not looking at a person what they visibly look like, because we all have unconscious bias. We all, we could look at someone, and someone who looks different than this person, you might be more attracted to vote for that person, right? So you take away that, you just listen to the person's story, and you vote on who they are as a person rather than what they look like or how many likes they get on Facebook.
Yeah, all those things. Yeah.
So that's how we're going to be doing it. The initial nomination process, we're going to be doing it through the committee for the first year, and then we're going to be putting up the nomination website. That's going to be up. It will be up right now, actually, when you're listening to this. So you'll be able to go to the website and start putting in nominations for people that you know in your community, and it's
check it out. Yeah, and you said you guys are going to start at City Hall.
Yeah.
And is there going to be a walk?
Yeah. So we picked City Hall to make a statement in a way. We want to really, show that this is so important. And another reason why is so those men that get nominated from Boyle Street, from Mustard Seed, in those areas can actually get there and come and be present. So we're going to have the mayor there, city council, and we're going to be taking the awards show across Alberta every year. So we're going to have host nations and host communities that are going to host it. But the Warrior Walk is a whole separate piece that we kind of wanted to include. And Leonard Cardinal and Janice had actually talked about this quite some time ago. And it was one of those things too that kind of got put down on the side. And we decided to incorporate it into the awards. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to have all of the women, the cookums, the aunties, the moms, the sisters, all waiting at the ledge. And we're going to have all the warriors, all the men who are nominated, and every man that wants to come with this warrior walk start at City Hall and march to the legislature to be welcomed and to be greeted by the women, to really, honor them and really make that connection again. And we did it by the ledge because it's by the water. And we really want to incorporate the water into the ceremony. So, it's going to be important. We're going to be doing it the Sunday before the awards. And we're going to, have all of our men from every nation that we can get out there to really support this walk.
That's amazing. That's, I think that's kind of what we need. Like, is to have more men walks and to recognize that, a lot of our Indigenous men are also missing and murdered. And I really appreciate that, the walks have started to include men, when they talk about those things. Because I guess there is, there is a lot of us that are, missing and murdered out there. And, I think, that's why we're doing this podcast as well, is to honor people in the community that are doing wonderful things such as yourself. I think it's important that we have something that celebrates men, that's created by men. And, it's time that we, have programs and learn how to, heal and create those safe spaces for men to be able to express themselves and to find answers through speaking to each other. I think it's super important. And so for what you do, and everything that you've done, I think it's you're a perfect guest to be on this podcast, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And one of the, do you got one more question? Do you got
No, I was just gonna say that Matt Patenaude is definitely a deadly uncle.
Deadly.
And I just got one more question that I kind of been asking all of the guests. Looking at a place like Palm Acres there, it's a beautiful facility. Do you think it's important for us to have a space like that that's like what do you call being in
not
non-treatment
attached,
non-treatment center, a non-treatment center that is a place for us to pray, a safe spot for us to have our sweats, that's within the city limits, that's actually within the downtown core, would be really cool to see. Because if you look at how many non-Indigenous places there is to pray, such as churches and mosques and those things that we see around, the hundreds that are surrounding Edmonton here. How important do you think it is for us as Indigenous people or Métis people or whoever, all of us together, to be able to have a safe space to pray?
I think it's probably the most important. I mean, we're talking about self-care. We're talking about, healing the circle and fixing the circle. We're talking about honoring men. Everything. It all comes down. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't follow their culture and they have other beliefs. But for those that want to learn their culture, where do they start? Where do you start? Like,
Yeah.
if I didn't get into government and get into the position I am in now, with the people I am with now, I would have never learned. I would have never had that opportunity. Like, I've seen people smudge at different events, and you hear people pray, but oftentimes when back home they're praying, um, in Catholicism or Christianity, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of our Indigenous people still follow those beliefs, right? So,
Yeah.
I would have never been able to do it, but I've always wanted to, and I've always wanted to learn. So if there was a place for Indigenous men and people to go where they could openly pray and not feel like you're kind of an outcast. And why I say that is because, for example, when we were doing family meetings, with the MMIWG, a lot of people wanted to smudge. I mean, before they go into court, they wanted to smudge. They wanted to ground themselves. I know a lot of families would take little pieces of sage and they put it in their shoe while they're in court, so they could just have that connection, to relax them and be prepared for the trauma that they're going to be facing. And we were told to go outside by the muster point, or
Yeah.
go to the corner, get off the property and go stand on the sidewalk over here. You would never say that to anybody. You would
Yeah.
never say that. You never tell someone, a Muslim person, to go pray on the sidewalk. There's places now in a lot of buildings that allow for prayer for anybody.
Yeah.
But they won't allow smudging.
Yeah.
Or they won't allow this or that. So having a place where someone can take away those barriers and actually just be themselves and have that barrier-free ceremony where they can have that open-hearted connection with Creator or whatever they want to do, I think is so important. And having healthy elders, having healthy male elders and female elders in there running these places, because, like you said, they're often tied to treatment centers,
Yeah.
or prisons,
Yeah.
or
But what happens after they leave the treatment center and they leave the prison? Where do they practice what they learned?
They get
right?
told to go to the sidewalk.
Or they get
smudge.
told to go out to the bush, and
Mhm.
and then not a lot of them don't have the ability to do that.
No, there's a lot of people that are within every major city across Turtle Island that they don't have the options to go out to the bush. And I think we need to also change our mentality as Indigenous people to think that we should be out there. No, we should have a center in every major city for us to pray, to have our sweats,
Mhm.
indoor and outdoor,
Mhm.
throughout the winter. Have an indoor place with buffalo hides and stuff for us to be able to pray. Just kind of exactly what you see at Palm Acres would be awesome to see that in every major city. And as we were speaking about it yesterday, they spent a lot of money for an apology, and it would have been nice to see some of that money actually go towards these programs and projects instead of
Well, apparently
spending
there will be
millions.
eventually coming from, there's always the promise of something from the Catholic Church.
Yes,
so
yeah, well-
eventually they'll be investing money into our programs, but
And then kind of
time will tell, right?
And then kind of going with the narrative that it's all the taxpayers' money that will pay for it, blaming the Indigenous people again. But it's all work in itself. So, but thank you so much for being on.
Oh,
man.
thank you both.
You're-
Awesome.
You're an awesome, deadly uncle, and keep up the wonderful work that you're doing.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you
Yeah,
very
man.
much for having me. Appreciate it.
Cool. You're listening to the Deadly Uncle Podcast,
a safe space for deadly uncle conversations.